The most important question that I have been asking myself and I have asked many people is, why do we need self-reliant India, especially in the electronics and semiconductor industry space? Now we live in a world of Zomato, Swiggy, and so on, right? So if we can order our food every day, we don't have to cook. Same thing, if we can import cheap components from China, Taiwan, or other countries, why do we need to produce them? We can always get it whenever we need, right? So there is no need to produce them on our own, especially when they are expensive. Semiconductor industry is not a cheap industry. It takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of money for investment to produce a very sustainable, very large industry. But why do we need that? Why do we have to do it on our own in spite of the exorbitant costs? So I'll answer these questions. Reason number one, you see that big brother on the top there. Uh, we want to believe that he's our big brother, but he is not. China is number one reason why we need our own electronic industry, why we need our own um, semiconductor industry. Why do I say that China is the number one reason? I could have given a lot of other excuses, other reasons, but why do I say China first? Because we have learned quite a bit in the recent past that China is a leader in semiconductor industry, and we compete with them quite a bit on several fronts. And we have a traditional rivalry with them in the space of knowledge industry as well as in many other industries. Right? We have a very serious conflict of interest with them in many areas, especially in the border region, right? So if China decides to turn off the tap, let's say I'll go back to my Zomato and Swiggy analogy. If we are so used to getting food every day from through Swiggy or Zomato and we forgot how to cook, and suddenly Swiggy and Zomato decide to close the business or shut off some of you based on your philosophy or ideology, they decide to shut you off. You should suddenly start learning to cook. And we did that in the recent past. When during the pandemic times, there was no Swiggy, there was no Zomato, so we learned how to cook, how to cook. Now, when we got into a conflict with China at the border recently, they could have easily stopped the tap of the flow of electronic goods into India. And they have done that to some extent. I'll give you a classic example of what I faced personally. We buy a microcontroller regularly in large scale. The cost of this microcontroller has increased 3 times in the last 6 months. Now, if that is something so small that I'm using it, its cost has increased 3 times. What do you say about other industries, other areas? We know that if the car industry depends heavily on electronics. Gone are those days when cars are only mechanical devices and some electrical devices. They're heavily dependent on electronic items. If the electronic items that we import from China are not available, our automobile industry is severely impacted. There is no doubt about it. And we are seeing this everywhere. God forbid, we have a very large country with a large appetite for electronic items. We don't produce any of them. And China is the only country on which we depend. And China shuts off the tap, we are completely crippled. So that's the reason why I want to cite China, our traditional enemy and traditional rival, who can make our life miserable in the future if we don't change ourselves today. Reason number two is India has a big appetite for electronic items. We buy so many things from across the world. Probably we are one of the largest importers of electronic items. We have a large appetite for mobile phones, large appetite for computers, desktops, servers, you name it. And a large component of that is imports, especially from China. Some of it from Taiwan, some of it from Korea and other places, European countries and so on. If we have a large appetite for these items, if we can mint money on our own, Why should we give that money to other countries? So the reason number two is there is a lot of money here, and it will be very unfortunate if we let this money go out of our country while we fulfill our own appetite for these big items. So the reason number two is financial reason. We need our money to stay in our country, and that money should not go especially to a country that is traditional rival for us. Okay, so that's reason number two. I have two more reasons. You look at that reason number three up there. I'm showing that there is electronic industry that is heavily susceptible to snooping or spying. United States has painfully discovered that many of the equipment that they imported from China, especially that tongue twister name, Huawei, that you, whatever you want to call it, that country with a typical Chinese name, that company has produced a lot of material, which when Americans started using, they figured out, they understood that there are snooping devices in it. Can a country like India afford it, especially when we use some of that equipment in defense? If we use such equipment that has all these snooping capabilities that are difficult to discover, if they end up in our defense labs, is that good for us? I will tell you a short story about what happened to Canada. Canada was one of the leaders in semiconductor industry, especially in the telecom area. They were going to be the leaders in 5G. Anyone who has heard the term Nartel networks, Canada was number one. And Canada was having orders from all over the world, and they were ruling to the extent of 70% of the market share in that area. One fine day, one engineer in Nortel discovered that their servers are being compromised. Using whose account? The account of the CEO of the company. His account itself was compromised, and through that, a large number of documents, thousands of documents were downloaded. And where did all these documents go eventually? They went to a place in China. Now, this is a serious thing. Canada was helpless. Everything that followed after that resulted in complete collapse of Nortel networks. Can we afford that? Can India afford that? Can United States afford that? Can European Union countries afford that? We can't.